The seminar is being hosted by the Indic Studies Project of the Center for the Study of Developing Societies in collaboration with Nehru Memorial Museum and Library. It's sixth in a series of conferences organized by this network, which is supported in part by the Arts and Humanities Council of the UK, to explore the public representation of a religion called Hinduism. This particular seminar, I believe, is the first of its kind. We have made an unusual effort to bring together scholars of religion from academia with spiritual leaders and their adherents from a wide variety of religious organizations and institutions. All of those who are to speak are not yet here, some are on their way, but you will see that the range is quite respectable, considering that we actually were supposed to have only 2 days for it, but I, in the most undemocratic manner, extended it to almost 3 days because I'm hungry to know personally how to understand faith traditions from the perspective of faith leaders themselves. We are indeed very honored by the presence of so many distinguished faith leaders amidst us. Many of the participants from these religious organizations are scholars in their own right. Quite a few of the scholarly academics also religious individuals. We hope that this experiment at creating a space for dialogue between academic scholars of religion and religious leaders will lead to a fresh approach to the study of how our faith traditions have contributed to defining the agenda of education and economic development in India. Please note, I have repeatedly made this clear in all the mailers I sent you, that in these sessions you will attend, the terms Hindu, education and development, all these terms are being used in their broadest sense. For instance, we include spiritual and moral teachings in the term education. And I'm one of those who believe that even those who conduct free yoga classes and pranayama and meditation classes in our neighborhood parks are actually making a very valuable contribution to education. I would also like to clarify at the outset that many of the faith leaders speaking in the conference do not identify themselves as quote-unquote Hindu, but prefer terms like Sanatan Dharma. And Swami Agnivesh ji, of course, says, "Hum to Arya hain." वो बताएंगे क्यों ऐसा सोचते हैं. Those presenting have been requested to address a few of the following questions and add more if they like. These questions were also sent to you in the invite we sent to all, and also those who are presenting papers were given some of these key questions as guidelines. 1. How does the religious organization describe itself to itself? What are the theological core beliefs behind its founding and functioning? Why does it accept or refuse to accept the label Hindu? What is the distinctive religious spiritual worldview that influences the work of this particular institution that we will hear about one after another? How do the religious beliefs, traditions and structures of the particular institution relate to the social, educational and development work it has undertaken? Is its outreach limited to any particular group or sect? How is the institution different from secular, educational and social work institutions? How are the spiritual and moral values of that particular faith tradition represented in the teaching material used by the organization? To what extent are the services delivered by the institution perceived as religious in nature? What pattern of activities emerge out of the mix of religious beliefs and its educational and developmental programs? What is the financial support base of the organization? We have kept adequate time for discussions after each presentation. You will see the way it's structured. There's half an hour for each presentation, followed by half an hour for question answers. We hope you will find all of you who are here will be here all 3 days with us. Meanwhile, allow me to make a few comments at the start. Today, this work would have been shared with my colleague John Zewas, who unfortunately is still stuck at Dubai airport. He was otherwise also to explain to you what we are trying to do through this network because of some new visa regulations. So he missed his flight day before yesterday. He would have been here today. So the task is left mainly to me. And when John joins us tomorrow, maybe he'll do his bit to explain what made him start this network. For the majority of believers, there seems to be no contradiction between belonging to a particular sect, sampradaya, and being a Hindu. This identity has indeed come to stay, even though the title of this network is Public Representation of a Religion Called Hinduism. As you well know, there's a lot of debate on whether Hinduism actually fits that category or doesn't, or is it an imposed category. But I think it's more important to understand that for millions, this identity matters. They do identify themselves as Hindu, whether they are Radha Swamis or they are Swami Narayan followers. It has acquired not just a religious connotation, but also a political one. So strong is the contemporary urge for a distinct identity that any claim that Hinduism is only an imaginary construct would lead many believers to become very upset, and some to even indulge in violent protests. Thus, it is probably more realistic and safe to accept the claims of those who think their religion is Hinduism, as well as those who wish to assert a separate identity, because most of the acquired identities are intrinsically a matter of personal choice. In one sense, there is legitimate fear in academia. I must confess that I had a lot of negative reactions from a lot of friends about trying to do this mix. In fact, just last night while we were at dinner, Paul Ras, a friend, an old friend who's been working on issues of Hinduism, Hindutva, told me, and this is a comment I've heard from many, Madhu, I don't like you mixing around with these religious guys. And it's seen as though you are treading some dangerous territory and you're likely to lose your mental balance. It's interesting that when my approval ratings went up dramatically when I organized a meeting in this very hall with separatist, secessionist leaders from Kashmir and made them sit on this table with mainstream political parties to say, let's look for a democratic solution. What are the possibilities of finding a solution to the Kashmir problem through democratic means? At that time, as I said, my approval ratings went up dramatically because I was willing to sit down with secessionists, terrorists, many of whom have murder on blood on their hands. But sitting with religious leaders is something people fear in the academia, and the manner in which we polarize this whole debate, I think, needs to be taken care of. Academics and scholars claim that their role is to offer impartial, objective critiques of the subjects of their study. It becomes difficult to critique an organization or a faith leader in his or her presence, or in the presence of his followers. There are obvious consequences. If the organization under study does not approve of the interpretation being offered by the scholar, it may well mean denial of access to the devotees as well as the institution, and shutting off access to all its archives and records, and in short, putting an end to the research project. My own research on women's education by the R.S. Samaj in Punjab came to a halt because Acharya Lajavati ji, who at that time controlled access to institutional records, would just not make available many important documents she had at her disposal. Not surprisingly, scholars of such organizations and religious reform movements often feel compelled to self-censor what they write, to diplomatically not emphasize inconvenient facts and tailor-make their account to please the leaders of a faith group under study. These concerns are indeed understandable. But I confess that I chose to shape this conference in this way because I feel very strongly that it is important for scholars of religion to learn to deal with criticism from faith practitioners and vice versa.